It's the Real News Network. I'm Sharmini Pires coming to you from Baltimore. U.S. Lieutenant General Sean McFarland told Associated Press that the Islamic State has been reduced to as few as 15,000 fighters. He said the enemy is in retreat on all fronts. With so much focus this week on Aleppo, Syria, and Turkey-Russia reset, there's very little news that we hear of coming out of Iraq. Why? Well, we are going to talk about Iraq and what's happening there. And joining us to do that is Sabah Alnasseri. Sabah is an associate professor and director of the graduate program of political science at York University in Toronto. Sabah, thank you so much for joining us today.
Good to be with you, Sharmini.
So, Sabah, the comments of the U.S. general suggest that the campaign against Islamic State has been successful and almost over. Do you think this has brought about some stability to the country, especially to the people of Iraq?
Well, I'm not quite sure where General McFarland has his numbers, but even if this is correct, they have 15,000 fighters. The problem is, when the Iraqi army retook Fallujah and Ramadi, 100,000 people were displaced and thousands were killed, not only during the campaign to retake the city, but also through some sectarian militia carried killing on the local population. This is a breeding ground for ISIS. Many of these civilians who got killed or their families are killed or displaced, they end up joining ISIS. So even if they have 50,000 fighters now, through this campaigning and the killing of civilians, this will give them new recruits, those who want to take revenge on the Iraqi army, the militias or the US army, and so on. So it is just, a statistical figure which has less relevance on the reality of the ground.
Right. And then one of the things that we hear very little about is sort of the major dilemmas that are going on in the Iraqi government itself. There's a huge corruption case going on involving Iraqi parliamentary speaker and the defense minister. Tell us a little bit about that.
There are three issues here, I think, of concern. The one is the question of corruption, as you said. The second one, internal fight and struggle among different factions and politicians within the parliament. And the third issue is, of course, the question of the city of Mosul and the so-called liberation of the city of Mosul. The first one, the corruption affair. Last week, one of the members, actually a few members of the parliament, especially Al-Nusayf, they brought a corruption case against the defense minister Al-Ubaidi. So when he was summoned to the parliament last week and questioned by the parliament, he actually accused Al-Nusayf and the Speaker of the House, Salim al-Jubouri, and other five parliamentarians. He accused them of corruption and tried to blackmail him or force him to seal armed deals with the United States and so on. So much that the Minister President Abadi opened up an investigation against these MPs and issued a ban on their travels until the investigation is over. Of course, a few days ago, the Speaker of the House, Salim al-Jubouri, was cleared of these corruption affairs. But what does this tell me is that there's an enormous pressure on the Iraqi street, on the Abadi government to deal with corruption. And there's a few days ago, the Iraqi government signed an agreement with the UNDP, the United Nations Development, to recruit an international investigator to train Iraqi investigator to fight corruption. So there's enormous pressure on the government to deal with corruption. This, of course, creates tension among different factions and politicians of different parties within the parliament, facing accusation of corruption and so on. And the second issue is the internal quarrel and struggle among these factions and politicians around the question of Mosul, or better, around the question of post-liberated Mosul. Who will control the city, who will be in charge in Mosul, and how to deal with the many Iraqi generals and officers, mostly from Mosul, who were laid off during the depacification period.
Why is Mosul so important?
Well, you see, significant is, before going back to Mosul, is 2 days ago, the Iraqi Parliament issued a law of de-Baathification again. For me, it's significant because I think it refers to Mosul, because the majority of the Iraqi generals and officers come from Mosul. And most of them were laid off by Bremer at that time and by the Iraqi government, accusing them of being Ba'athist, although the absolute majority of them were not Ba'athist. So all of these generals and officers and soldiers in Mosul, they are unemployed since years, they don't have any pensions and so on. Some of them, of course, sided with ISIL, others not. So the question among these different factions, especially the Shiite and the Kurds parties within the parliament, if we retake Mosul, what to do with all these 10,000 of generals and officers and bureaucrats? Because then they want to be, hired. They want to be, they want to get back their public offices and so on. So I think the quarrels now among these factions and politicians is to ensure that their employee, their supporter, their party members, they keep their job, they keep the public funding, and there's no way that those ex-generals, officers, or bureaucrats, they can come back to the state apparatus. So just to give you an example, when, for instance, Al-Ubaidi accused the Speaker of the House, Al-Juburi, of corruption, if you look at these two figures, Al-Ubaidi himself is from Mosul. The defense minister is from Mosul, from a different clan of Mosul. Whereas Al-Juburi is very close to the Nujayfi clan. And Nujayfi clan used to control Mosul until 2014 when ISIS captured Mosul and Al-Ubaidi resigned or was pushed out from his office. So you can see also a struggle among different clans from Mosul over the question of post-conflict or post-liberation Mosul will control the city. And the third question, I think the major one, is the preparation to the so-called liberation. I don't call it liberation because, the recapturing of other cities like Fallujah, Tikrit, Ramadi, etc., caused the death of 10,000 of people and displacement of 100,000 of people. So that in the meantime, in Iraq, we have 3.3 displaced million people within Iraq only. And in the last few months, 100,000 families from Mosul fled the city, fearing the offensive and, of course, the sectarian cleansing, etc. So this will create a disaster for the civil population. The preparations are going on. The Iraqi government think that they can liberate the city by the end of the year, which I don't think. That's not realistic. But you can see even during their preparation for the liberation of Mosul, these tensions started within different parties and politicians within the parliament, displacement of 100,000 of people, some conflict among the Peshmerga, the Kurdish forces, and the so-called Hashd al-Sha'bi, the popular mobilization fronts, Shiite, some of them sectarian, backed by Iran, conflict between them and the Peshmerga, and between these mobilization fronts and Sunni tribal forces. So you have a lot of conflict formation going on even before the city of Mosul is liberated, which reflects again on and explain why there are tension and conflict within the parliament among different politicians and factions there.
And Sabah, in terms of the U.S. involvement in all of this, in government and their effort to, what they were trying to do, negotiate between the different sides, is that still going on, and is it having any impact?
Well, I think the U.S. playing different games here, because I was just looking at the news yesterday and today, and the parliament was outraged that the Iraqi government, Mr. Abbadi, signed a deal, a memorandum of understanding with the United States to supply weapons, U.S. weapons and arms to Iraq. But this was secured by a loan to the Iraqi government and with a high interest rates on them. And the parliament was not informed about this deal. So there's a conflict now between the parliament and the government around these issues, that arms supplies or memorandum of understanding or other deals that the parliament is not informed, and especially in the preparation for the liberation of Mosul. So you have a lot of tension going on also between the parliament and the government because of the U.S. Games with different factions within the Iraqi parliament or with the Iraqi government or with the Peshmerga or the Kurdish government vis-a-vis the Iraqi government. They create a lot of tension and conflict within the parliament in Baghdad, but also in Kurdistan.
Right. Wow, there's no peace coming for the people of Iraq.
No,
This is,
we will witness within the next few weeks and months an intensified conflict, war, displacement, refugee crisis, and of course killing on many sides. Not only fighting ISIS, but killing and fighting among the Peshmergas and the Shiite militias, between the Shiite militias and Sunni tribal forces, between some of the forces within Mosul who are actually fighting ISIS but not part of the Iraqi army. They will want to be secured in Mosul in the post-conflict time. So we will witness a lot of conflict, violence, and displacement within the next weeks and months.
It certainly raises the bigger question. They've moved from Iraq, destroyed Afghanistan,
Yes.
Libya, and now Syria, possibly
Yemen.
Turkey, and it goes on.
Yes, absolutely.
All right. Sabah Alnasseri, I thank you so much for joining us today. And we look forward to ongoing updates of developments in Iraq from you. So looking forward to that.
It would be my pleasure. And thanks for having me, Sharmini.
And thank you for joining us on the Real News Network.